Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Playmaker's Corner podcast. I am your host for this episode, Kodey Stauffer, and I am also going to be joined later by Coach V, aka Simon Villanos. But before we get into that, we have the 4A recap. Then Simon's going to take over on the 5A recap. I'm going to talk 4A rankings. He's going to talk 5A rankings. Then we're going to talk about Playmaker of the Week. So without further ado, we're going to hop right into this 4A recap real quickly. There were some games that took place on 8/15. I talked about them in last week's episode, but just to revisit here, we had Berthoud beating Eagle Ridge Academy 21-6. The Classical Academy, aka TCA, beating Vista Peak Prep 19-6, and Thornton losing to Legacy 25-0. But now that that is in the rearview mirror, we had a ton of games this week, starting off on Monday, August 17th here. We had one really electric debut here from Skyview here, who took home a 45-0 win over Bruce Randolph. And then Berthoud, following their win in their inaugural game, would face an absolute buzzsaw in one of the top-ranked teams in Mountain View. And they would fall 39-0 to their northern neighbor here. And then Holy Family Northridge would play in their first ever contests as flag football programs here. And this was a pretty interesting game here. Went down to the wire here, but Holy Family ultimately pulls away from Northridge 27-22 for their first ever program win. Moving along, we also had Thomas Jefferson, who would get the short end of the stick against Denver East, falling 42-0. We also had, for a title contender, Green Mountain face off against 5A title contender Legend High School, but it was basically all Legend in that first half here. After a first quarter that was only one score away, 13-6, Legend would go on a 27-point unanswered streak to ball ahead 40-6. Green Mountain would rally a little bit here in the third quarter, but it was too little too late as they would fall to Legend 46-22 in the loss here. Plumlee, the quarterback, went 19 of 37 for 214 yards and 3 passing touchdowns, as well as 50 rushing yards, but her 6 interceptions proved to be quite costly here, especially considering the defense themselves only forced 1 turnover and only got 1 sack on the night here, according to their stats. Now, Marissa Van Gilder still had a chance to do her thing, 9 receptions, 106 yards, and a hat trick of touchdowns, and they will still be looking to be one of the top dogs in 4A, but was just not their night against one of the top dogs in 5A. And then finally, Dakota Ridge would rally seriously crazy in the second half after falling behind 15-0 in the first half, including allowing a safety. They would score 15 unanswered points in the third quarter, but in overtime, after scoring a touchdown, they would not convert on the PAT, and then Maddie Wolcott would roll left and score on the PAT, and so Dakota Ridge would lose 22-21. I did watch the film of this game. Dakota Ridge's offense was just wildly inconsistent and kind of gave away a bunch of sloppy turnovers, but ultimately just had some things that they did execute pretty well. And defensively, they also had their share of big plays to close this gap, but it would not be enough to pull off the comeback win against Heritage, and so they would fall to 0-1. Moving on to the 18th, not as many games here, only 4 to report on, including Sierra, who would go against 5A Liberty, falling 0-30. Then Aurora West College Preparatory Academy would lose to Rangeview by the same score. Then over in this neck of the woods, you had Wheat Ridge and Aurora Central here. And Aurora Central, I do believe, is competing on the 4A level for girls flag football. And in that regard, they were able to, pick up a couple of wins this week, including this one against Wheat Ridge. Now, the final score of this would be 18-12. Pretty close game here. Aurora Central getting great production out of senior Jasmyn Castillo, 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in this winning performance. And finally, Lutheran would beat 5A Thunder Ridge 24-0. Lutheran looking like an absolute buzzsaw in this opening week here, and that's especially highlighted by Eleanor Carlson, 280 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, finding junior Abby Bradshaw twice and for over 100 yards in the end zone. Georgia Pittman as well got a touchdown, and freshman Caitlin O'Connor in Lutheran's opening win. And that takes us through August 18th. Moving along to August 19th, there were 7 games on the 4A level here. And looking into this was a bit more of a busier week for Lupton with their opening program win over Hinckley, 13-9, something worth looking at and celebrating. And Berthoud, after falling to Mountain View just a couple days earlier, would bounce back and get their second program win against Holy Family here, 12-0 in this game here. Now, in this winning effort, you did have 2 rushing touchdowns here. Once again, Amira Botkin and Ava Wysock here getting it done. And then the defense pitching a shutout performance against Holy Family with a ton of sacks here. Botkin recording 5 of them, Wysock with 3. And then you also had Urker here with a pair here and 3 interceptions from the defense as well. Moving along, Eagle Ridge Academy got back into the win column with a 1-score win over Conifer, 15-7. They scored all 15 of those points in the second quarter. Conifer tried to rally back in the fourth quarter, but it was too little too late, as this Eagle Ridge Academy defense did very well, forcing 3 turnovers. And outside of Izzy Ogden, were able to slow down this Conifer attack. Izzy, though, 9 receptions, 138 yards, and a touchdown. Definitely somebody to keep an eye out for in the coming weeks. Elizabeth here started off their season with a 32-6 win over Fountain Fort Carson and remain as perhaps one of the top dogs heading into this year. Monarch here, 19-0 win over Northridge to kind of pick up from where they left off last year, or at least that seems to be the plan. Thornton would beat Mountain Range 12-6, and you had a shout out here. Angie Lor, by the way, one of our interns, is a Thornton alum and now at Kansas Wesleyan, and you know that she had to plug Deyanis Holgan, I want to say is how I say that. Angie, please let me know if I said that wrong. But she had 4 interceptions and 3 pass breakups in this very close win for Thornton here, who just narrowly pull it out and deliver a 12-6 dub over Mountain Range. And finally, 4A Vanguard falls to 5A Liberty, 19-0 in a contest that, as the game went on, Liberty started to find their bearings here and ultimately got that knockout punch in the fourth quarter to finish with a 19-0 win. Now, the 20th was a pretty busy day. This was Thursday here. Aurora Central finishes as the week 2-0 with a 38-2 win over Bruce Randolph. Then you had Denver West win a close one against Hinckley. Hinckley just not able to close the door on these close matchups here, so the Cowgirls start off 20-14. Monarch here also finished the week 2-0, defeats one of the heavyweights of 4A last year in Pomona, 20-6. Meanwhile, in an absolute brawl, or I should say beatdown, Wheat Ridge pulls away from Kennedy 65-0. I believe that is the biggest margin of victory from this past week in 4A. Regis Groff plays a close game against Stanley Lake, winning 20-12, but improving to 2-0, or I should say setting up the beginning of their 2-0 streak following Saturday. Lutheran remains undefeated this week as well, 2-0 with a 50 burger over Highlands Ranch. And Colorado Springs Christian brings Skyview back down to earth with a 12-0 win. And Dakota Ridge, getting the short end of the stick, facing a hungry Arvada West team, loses 47-0. Speaking of 47-0, Palmer would find themselves in a similar situation against 5A Doherty, falling by the exact same score. And Manual, after coming in super hot and looking good for the 4A ranks, loses 2 games to 5A opponents, Fountain Fort Carson 27-6 and Smoky Hill 34-0. And Green Mountain gets their bounce back win 39-0 over Ralston Valley here. And finally, August 22nd, lots of games on this day too. Pomona gets their bounce back win against Thornton 40-0. Mullen, after falling to Columbine just a couple of nights earlier, beats Steamboat Springs 13-0 to go back to 500. Aurora West College Preparatory Academy falls to Vista Peak Prep 48-0. Regis Groff, like I said, finishes the week 2-0 with a win against Bear Creek. Once again, 38-0 in this big win. And Littleton, I know, fell to Heritage. It was 34-6, I want to say, when I stopped watching the game. So Heritage goes 1-1 in their opening weekend. And Littleton falls to Arapahoe 26-6 in their opening game. Lakewood and Denver North switching spots here. This is a big storyline for me, as Lakewood here goes to 4A while Denver North moves up to 5A. This game gives me some questions as to how that could happen. But Sailor Slaughter, 26 of 37, 318 yards, and 4 touchdowns to only 1 pick, while also rushing for a touchdown. And what a receiving core here. Ava Webb, just as I talked about from her blitz work here, comes in and absolutely dominates at Lakewood. 8 receptions, 176 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Meanwhile, you also had Nevaeh Cisneros here with a pair of touchdowns herself. Defensively, they were able to force a couple of interceptions and obviously pitch a shutout in a big win that vindicates my selection of them in my top 10. And so Lakewood starts off the season undefeated. Golden here would bring Eagle Ridge Academy back down a peg here, beating them 12-6, which I believe is a repeat of that score from the postseason. And Liberty, 37-7 over Air Academy. Air Academy kept it close until the fourth quarter, where they would eventually slip away with lots of offensive miscues and are trying to bounce back next week. And the game of the week, or at least should have been talked about as the game of the week, we had another semifinal rematch here with TCA versus Green Mountain here. These games just continue to prove to be classics here, as TCA and Green Mountain were deadlocked, and through one quarter, TCA only had a 1-point lead thanks to PATs to go up 7-6, and would score again before halftime to go 14-6. But Green Mountain down but never out, 20 unanswered points in quarter 3 to reclaim a lead that dates back to matchups of years past, going up 26-14. But it would be the vet experience of TCA here with 14 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to complete their own comeback win and once again send Green Mountain home with a last-second loss, 28-26. Definitely the game of the week here in the effort here for Green Mountain. Savannah Plumley, 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions, turning the ball over quite a bit. Van Gilder willing this team very mightily in that third quarter. 10 receptions, 97 yards, and another hat trick of touchdowns, definitely being the go-to for this team here. And on the defensive side of the ball, Amelia Goyden is listed as having 4 interceptions, going absolutely bonkers in this game. But TCA ultimately pulls it out, and that will do it for all of the 4A scores. Now I'm going to pass it off to Coach V here with the 5A recap.
What's good, y'all? Coach V here, and I got your week 1 and 0 5A girls flag football recap. We're going to talk about all the games from the 5A side here. I know some 5A teams played some 4A teams, but we're just going to talk about the 5A side. We're going to talk about who played who, the scores, and some key stats and stat leaders from the box scores we are able to access. And so, without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop into it. Week 0, there were only a couple games played here. It was played on August 15th, Saturday. Let's go ahead and start with this one. Legacy would go ahead and play, I believe it's 4A Thornton, and they would take care of them 25-0. No stats, unfortunately, from that game, but they would go ahead and handle them. A big fourth quarter where they really pulled away here, scoring 13 in the fourth to win 25-0. Then we have Vista Peak Prep, a 5A program, playing TCA, the defending 4A state champs from last year. And, this was actually closer than some of us expected in the preseason. Vista Peak would still lose to TCA 6-19, but like I said, a much closer game than expected. Riley, I think it's Berquist, the quarterback for Vista Peak, went 10 of 24 for 107 yards and 1 touchdown, no picks. Also had 30 rushing yards there, doing her thing. Receiving wise, their lead receiver was the senior Joanna Bird, who had 4 for 74 and a touchdown. Other than that, nobody with over 2 receptions for this offense here, or sorry, 3 receptions, or no, actually it is, sorry, over 2 receptions for this offense here. You had Allison and Fernandez with 2 for 5 and 4 yards, and then you had one big, 23-yard reception from Gabrielle Trammell, but this offense really just couldn't get too much going there against TCA. Defensively, it was Bird, the senior, who led with 11 flagpoles. Right behind her was Martinez with 8, Olivia Martinez with 8 here. And then they had 2 sacks between, I think it's Elias Smith, the freshman, as well as Alcianza, the junior. And then the senior for them, Hope Lockhart, had an interception, but unfortunately not enough as they fall to TCA. And then we had a big 5A matchup here. Mountain Vista facing off with Ralston Valley. Both teams ranked in our top 10 preseason wise, and both teams, hitting a little bit of a rebuild, if not a rebuild, a reload, I should say, as both teams have been great these first 2 seasons that Gross High School flag football has been around, and how without their quarterbacks from last season, Kaylin Corcus moving on, and Ariana Akey obviously going on to Nebraska. And this game was just not close. Mountain Vista with a 49-6, some would say, statement win over Ralston Valley. Peyton Marr in her first start as a junior. I don't know if it's her first start. I think it is her first start ever, but she did get playing time the year or the 2 seasons before behind Akey, but she had herself a game, 27 of 35, 280 yards, 5 touchdowns, also 24 rushing yards. Super efficient play there as she did her thing, stepping into the role that Ariana Akey held the last 2 years and showing that it is a new era in Mountain Vista flag football, and definitely putting herself in Playmaker of the Week conversations. Receiving-wise, as expected, Lauren Culebro has stepped up and led with 4 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. You also have another senior here in Amelia Hansen, 8 for 58 and a touchdown. Kaylee Besh, another player we expected to step up, 6 for 56 and a touchdown. Sophomore Hoffmeyer, had a great game here. 3 receptions, 45 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. All players we knew that would be productive going into this next season. You also had Danny, I think it's Sheech, but she had 5 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown. Peyton Marr really spreading out the football here and doing a good job getting everyone involved as this offense was rolling. Defensively for them, they only held Ralston Valley to 6. Looking at sophomore Devin Dole, she led with 13 flagpoles, 4 of those for a loss. Kaylee Besh right behind her with 6. Dole also had 4 sacks in this game, which was great. Hoffmeyer picking up where she left off with a sack as well. But in the secondary, we knew the secondary would be tough. Kaylee Besh with 2 interceptions in this game. You also had junior Hadley Mattis with a pick, as well as junior, I think it's Avery Harris, and then Lauren Culebro all had interceptions. 5 total interceptions in this game. Riley Mamikin with a pass deflection as they really dominated on both sides of the football. For Ralston Valley, though, the reload definitely feels a little bit more of a rebuild, at least at this moment. Playing a tough opponent, but Alina, I think it's Rart, I want to say, in her first start, definitely a struggle in her first start against a very good secondary. 21 of 35, 146 yards, 1 touchdown. Completion percentage doesn't look too bad, but 6 interceptions in this game. Also 36 rushing yards for her. Tough to win a game where we're getting picked off that much. Receiving wise, Shelby Colosimo did her thing. 6 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Her second leading receiver was Liliana Mraz with 8 for 40, but after that, nobody else in double-digit receiving yards. Savvy Dortic only 9 yards on 3 receptions. Lily Lombardi not on the offensive side here, or at least not recording anything on the offensive side of the football, which is definitely interesting because I know in our preseason rankings we were expecting her to take a step forward as a receiver, but just lacking production in the receiving game there. Defensively, Dortic led with 8 flag pulls, 2 for loss here. No sacks, only 5 hurries from Bailey Cummins, their junior rusher, which is tough. And then no interceptions from this team. As like I said, Mountain Vista, looking more like a reload than a rebuild, goes ahead and takes care of Ralston Valley 49-6 in week 0 play. But now we're in week 1 here. Starting on August 17th, we have a handful of great 5A games. Like I said, we're going to go down the line and talk about every single one of them, starting with Legend. They go ahead and play Powerhouse out of the 4A classification, Green Mountain, and they take care of them 46-22. Yet another team with another quarterback change, plus losing Lucy Thompson and some other great players as well. You know, they're looking at more of a reload, it seems, as they start off pretty hot, 46-22 against a Green Mountain team that returns a decent amount of their squad. Addison Law, I think we, or at least I, kind of thought that she would be the projected starter at quarterback, and she did. Had a very efficient game, only 2 incompletions, 26 of 28. I believe she had a perfect first half here, but 275 passing yards for 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and just playing at an extremely high level. Like I'm saying, this is super efficient. I don't think she threw an incompletion into the second half, and by then, I mean, she had, I want to say 25 or 21 completions in a row, which is a state record, so congrats to her. But she came out and she showed out that it is a new era in Legend Flag football as she lays down the law. Receiving wise, as expected, this receiving core very, very good, starting with junior Presley Easley, who led the team this time, 4 receptions, 72 yards and a touchdown. You also had junior Ella Smith, a player who made our watch list, 9 receptions, 69 yards, and a touchdown. Tori Curdy, only 2 receptions, but 65 yards and a touchdown there. And then you had Sasha O'Hara, the junior, 2 for 37 and a touchdown. Defensively for them, they went to work here. Noelle Ho, the senior for them, led with 8 flag pulls here. Then sack-wise, I mean, their rushing group went to work. Tori Curdy, 2 sacks. Jenna Brown, a sack. And then I think it's Emma Fluger? But she had a sack as well. And then in the secondary, they're active too. Tatum Burke, 2 interceptions, which led the team. You had Reagan Stuber, Raya Matouche, and Presley Easley all record an interception against this Green Mountain team, as well as Legend looking very strong here to start against Green Mountain. Moving on, we have Rock Canyon versus Horizon. This is a pretty close game. I feel like both teams were very close to making our top 10, if not in it. I want to say Horizon actually made it over Rock Canyon, but either way, Horizon comes out and they go ahead and take care of Rock Canyon 19-12 in what would end up being a very, very close game here. looking at the stats, let's start with Horizon. Sophia De Annie, the standout quarterback for them. A little bit of a tougher game, 14 of 20, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. It looks like they actually also put in Nevaeh Stukis, who went 7 of 10 for 77 yards, no picks. So an interesting quarterback, I don't want to say battle, but an interesting quarterback duo going on over there at Horizon. Rushing-wise, Stukis also had 33 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Also 35 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown, so interesting there. Receiving-wise, it was Madison Velada who led with 7 for 68, and Jania Harris, who also was right behind her with 6 for 63, leading the receiving core. Defensively, it was Avon Medina who had 8 flag poles, which led the team. Stukis also had a sack there. And then Stukis with an interception. Doing it all, mind you. But she caught 1 out of 4 that this Horizon team was able to get. Henley, Holly, Madison Velada, and Medina also had interceptions. For Rock Canyon, the junior quarterback, Sophia Bonsetter, had a tough go. 11 of 23, 129 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 picks here. Did have 77 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, though. Receiving-wise, it was Faith Miller who led with 3 for 55, followed by Sloan, I think it's Dezois, who had 3 for 33. The sophomore for them, Kylie Clean, caught a touchdown, I think the lone receiving touchdown in this game. But just offensively, not as put together as they probably wanted to be as they are working through it here. Still playing in a close game, but still a tough go. Too many turnovers and missed opportunities. Defensively for them, though, Riley Olsen led with 7 flagpoles. Senior, I think it's Alea Bug, had a sack, and then they also got 3 interceptions over there. Olivia Myers, the sophomore, Peyton Freeman, the senior, as well as Morgan Mestis, the sophomore, got interceptions in this game here. But unfortunately, they fall by a score to Horizon. Denver East would go ahead and play Thomas Jefferson, and Denver East bouncing back after a tough year last year, winning 42-0 over Thomas Jefferson. No stats here from Denver East, which is unfortunate. But for Thomas Jefferson, they struggled through 9 interceptions and played 3 different quarterbacks doing that. The leader in flagpoles was, I think it's Anya Wilson English, who had 14 for them, which is great. Also had an interception for them. So she did her thing, but unfortunately they fall to Denver East 42-0 amid offensive struggles. Chatfield would go ahead and play North Glen, and this game would go into overtime as North Glen would prevail, winning 13-7 over Chatfield here, which I would say some would see this as a little bit of an upset. Chatfield, they do have a new head coach over there, so a new regime, but you know, North Glen, they've been looking pretty decent here. And so I would say this is a big win for North Glen to start the season. Let's look at the stats, though. Let's start with North Glen. Caitlin Fujinami, not too bad of a game. 16 of 22, 127 yards. Did throw 1 interception, but did throw a touchdown. Other than that, was pretty efficient. Had 59 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown here. Receiving-wise, only threw to 3 receivers here. Vanessa Rodriguez was one of those, 6 receptions for 50 yards and caught that touchdown. Evelyn Jaimes, the senior for them, back at it as their lead receiver, 9 receptions, 66 yards, and then the other senior, Lila Watson, had 2 for 11. Defensively, Carol Martinez Ticerino led with 11 flagpoles for them. Madeline almost in this game, 5 sacks, as she is also back at it. And then Lucero and Fujinami each with 3 pass deflections as they were able to get it done. For Chatfield, offensively, a lot of struggles and maybe a little bit of an identity crisis to start the season here. Sadie Goodwin, who I thought would maybe be the starter here, only had 7 pass attempts for 13 yards and 1 touchdown. It looked like the junior for them, Sophia, I think it's Pulliam, had 10 for 25 for 66 yards and an interception, which was tough. Goodwin did have 54 rushing yards on 6 carries, though. Also caught 9 receptions for 45 yards as their lead receiver, but Jenna Lee was behind her with 2 receptions for 22 yards, and it looks like Brooklyn Wolf, 1 reception for 3 yards. Just not a lot going on over there. Goodwin led with 5 flag pulls on defense, and then also had an interception. Ooh, a tough go for Chatfield in this first game against North Glen, as North Glen comes out on top, 13-7 in OT. Heritage would go ahead and play Dakota Ridge for a Dakota Ridge, and this one would also go to overtime, as Heritage would just barely get by them 7-6 here, not only being able to score, but also getting the PAT to put them over them. And, mind you, this Heritage team was up 15-0 in the first half, and then Dakota Ridge scored 15 points in the third quarter to tie this one up in a crazy game here. But let's go ahead and look at the stats for Heritage. Their quarterback, the sophomore Maddie Walcott, got in there, 18 of 28, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions there. Piper Wheeler also went 3 of 5 for 26 yards, no touchdowns or picks. Walcott, though, did have 29 rushing yards on 12 attempts for a rushing touchdown, and then she was able to find, I think it's Adelie Siebel, who was very productive this game, 13 receptions, 128 yards, and a touchdown. Also, hey, looking at this, I think it's Claire Wachowski. I don't believe played last year. I could be wrong, but played this year. 5 receptions, 52 yards, which is big time for them. And then defensively, Mia Kidd, the senior, had 8 flag pulls, also had a sack for them. But it was the senior, Caroline Belair, who had 3 interceptions for this Heritage squad on the way to their win over Dakota Ridge. Moving on to Tuesday, we have a couple more games here. I believe we actually have 5 more games. Let's talk about it. Vista Peak Prep playing Columbine. They arguably upset Columbine 13-12, winning by 1 point here. Their quarterback, Riley Bergquist, 16 of 35, 203 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Also 50 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for them. Once again, the junior for them, Gabrielle Trammell, led with 5 receptions for 70 yards, followed by Joanna Bird with 3 for 30 or 54 yards. But it was Olivia Martinez who caught 1 long 44-yard touchdown that got this team going there. Olivia Martinez, as well as a fellow junior Alazia Patton, led with 6 flag pulls, Patton with a sack as well, and then Martinez with a interception as they take care of Columbine. For Columbine, a new quarterback, and maybe not the worst here, 18 of 35, which is solid for Kennedy Monteith here. 164 yards and a touchdown. They also had a rushing touchdown from Caitlin Davis here. Their lead receiver was Reese McFall, who had 8 receptions for 125 yards and a touchdown, and really took on the majority of the workload on offense, but unfortunately could not get it done. Defensively for them, the senior Camilla, I think it's Kosick, led with 10 flag pulls here. The other senior, Kaya Lowe, had a sack, and then Kosick had an interception, and Monteith also caught an interception as well, but unfortunately just could not get past Vista Peak Prep. Grandview would go ahead and play Legacy, and Grandview, picking up where they left off, won big time, 33-0, giving Legacy their first loss of the season here. Brooke Sullivan, 8 of 16 for 75 yards and a touchdown. You also had Cadence Thomas, though, 49 yards and a touchdown thrown in this one. Solviude had 3 rushes for 54 yards, and then Sullivan also had a rushing touchdown in there. Receiving-wise, Jaden, I think it's Schwabauer, had 1 reception for 28 yards there. Bergeson had 3 for 25 and a touchdown, and Tracy 2 for 19 and a touchdown. Defensively, Schwabauer led with 7 flag pulls, also co-led in sacks with 2, as well as fellow junior, I think it is Colette Escobar, also had 2 Godwin, the senior for them, Bryn Godwin, had a sack, as well as the junior Mia Forsyth having a sack, as it got 6 sacks in this game. Schwalbauer with an interception, as she played well in this one, as they win 33-0. Rangeview would go ahead and play Aurora West College Prep here, the 4A team, and they would take care of them 30-0 for Rangeview. Their quarterback, the sophomore, her name is Ana Hernandez Rivera, 17 of 31, 173 yards and 3 touchdowns in a fantastic performance here. Also had a rushing touchdown from the senior Harmony Mills, also 14 yards there. But the junior for them, that is Mia Stanton, 10 receptions for 153 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. For this defense here, it was the junior Gabriela, I think it's Polifort, who had 4 flag pulls. And then you had Ramirez, Areola, and Brown with a sack each. Stanton with 3 interceptions here, as she was definitely player of the game here. And then you had Romero King, and I think it's Nungud. Ooh, I'm not going to say that. But the junior, number 13, who had an interception, as Rangeview gets their first win, I believe, of the season against Aurora West College Prep. Then we got a big one here, Ralston Valley versus Cherry Creek, 2 teams in a current rebuild here. And Ralston Valley goes ahead and they squeeze past them, getting their first win of the season. Elena Rauer, her first win as a starter at quarterback, 13 of 26 though, 97 yards, 1 pick, also 27 rushing yards. Savvy Dortic got involved more here, 4 for 33. Shelby Colosimo, 3 for 21. Lillian Barty caught one for 10, but not too much still going on the offensive side. Defensively, though, it was definitely a defensive game, as Liliana Mraz and Bailey Cummins both had 6 flag pulls. Cummins with 6 sacks in this one here, and then Haley Rabbit with a sack as well. Dorotic and Mraz each had an interception, as they would go ahead and, I don't want to say upset Cherry Creek. I feel like they're both in pretty similar spots, but they get back on track with the win over Cherry Creek. For Cherry Creek, it looks like it is Natalia Ball, I believe the sister of Sophia Ball, who is now the starter at quarterback after their longtime starter from the last couple seasons graduated, and I think is playing college basketball now, so shout out her. But Natalia Ball, 16 of 33 in her debut, 130 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick, did have 35 rushing yards here. Receiver Elizabeth Harbaugh had 4 for 59, that was their leader. And then Harper Tillman, a new addition for this defense, had 10 flag pulls for them. They were able to get 2 sacks, Katie Lee, the sophomore, and Liv Fisher, the freshman, getting in there. And then the junior for Cherry Creek, Emerson Terry, got an interception, but just not enough going on the offensive side of the football for them to take down Ralston Valley. Then we have Thunder Ridge playing for a Lutheran here, and Lutheran winning big in this one, 24-0 over Thunder Ridge, as they would struggle. Cassidy Belling here for them, 15 of 23, 143 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick. They did have the sophomore Lainey Ensign, who had 53 rushing yards in this game. Claire Sims, 3 for 41. She led the team. And then no stats on the defensive side here. But obviously the struggles on offense for Thunder Ridge got them, as they fell to first-year program and 4A team Lutheran 24-0. Wednesday, we have a whole bunch of games here. Starting with Denver East getting a win over Cherokee Trail, 19-12, a nice win for them. No stats from Denver East, but for Cherokee Trail, unfortunately starting the season with a loss once more. Hutchinson Helen at quarterback, 17 of 35, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns and 1 pick though. Not too bad, just not enough production for them at the end of the day. Receiving wise, their leader was Salas Sophia, 4 for 55 and a touchdown. And then it looks like the sophomore for them, I think it's Kalunga Annabelle, had 10 yards there. Actually, are these... what is going on? I feel like, I don't know why, but on their max preps for Cherokee Trail, pretty sure their last names are listed as their first names. So, excuse me there. I don't know what's going on there. But anyways, defensively for them, Gabby, I think it's Marshall here, or Marshall had 12 flag pulls, which led the team. Also led with 4 sacks. You also had Sophia Salas with 2 sacks for Cherokee Trail, but not enough as they fall to Denver East 19-12. Denver East, please put in your stats. We'd love to shout out your players. Moving on here, though, Chatfield plays Regis Jesuit, and they bounce back with a nice win over Regis, 26-13. No stats from Chatfield, which is kind of weird. But for Regis, it was their senior quarterback, Selly Dangler, who had a decent game, 27 of 35, 230 yards, 2 touchdowns here. Also 29 rushing yards, unfortunately just not enough to keep pace with Chatfield. Their lead receiver was Caitlin Bueller, who's been on the team for a couple of years now, 3 for 93 and 2 touchdowns for the junior. You also have Mika Jones, who was 5 for 56 for them. Defensively, they had 2 who led or co-led here, and Annabelle Kinder and Victoria Hadley each having 4 flag pulls, and then Kinder also had an interception as Regis Jesuit falls to Chatfield 26-13. Horizon would go ahead and play Legend here, and Legend continuing to dominate a 25-point second quarter here as they win 46-0. Addison Law once more dominating in this one, 17 of 23, 237 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick. Also had a rushing touchdown as well. Receiving wise, Sasha O'Hare led with 2 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. Tori Curdy 2 for 43 and a touchdown. Ella Smith 3 receptions for 39 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Presley easily a receiving touchdown. Also, I think it's Emma Flogeries as well with a receiving touchdown. Addison Law, I don't know if she has a nickname yet, but you might as well call her the Judge the way down. She's laying down the law over there. Addison the Judge Law. If that's not a thing, I'm going to make it a thing here. The Judge doing her thing. Defensively, no flagpole or sack stats, which was kind of weird. But Sasha O'Hara and Reagan Stuber here each getting an interception for Legend. For Horizon, the struggles kind of continue. Sophia DeAnnie, 12 of 20 for only 54 yards, 2 picks here. Taking on the majority of the stats. Stukas still getting in there, but only 4 attempts here. Receiving wise, it was the freshman who led Aniston Dernberger, who went 3 of 17, which is not a whole bunch there. And then you had 4 co-leaders here in Riley Grove, Madison Vallada, Jania Harris, as well as Avon Medina, who each had 4 flag pulls. Stukas had an interception for them, and then as far as sacks go, Cadence Henry had a sack as Horizon just gets blown out by Legend, 46-0. Douglas County, though, they would continue, or not continue, but they would go ahead and get their first win here, continuing their dominance, winning 36-0 over Eagle Crest. No stats from that game. Thornton would play Mountain Range. Actually, I think Thornton might be a 5A team, or Mountain Range is a 5A team. Either way, they beat Mountain Range 12-6 here. No stats from Mountain Range. And actually, sorry, it's Mountain Range that is a 5A team. Excuse me there. Moving on, Valor in their first game. Valor Christian plays Denver South, and they get a win, 21-0. No stats for Denver South, but for Valor, it is the freshman Brayson Stewart who hops into this game in her debut, 24 of 30, 249 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Also 33 rushing yards. Is she an early newcomer of the year candidate? I will say so, as she performed as well as any other freshman in the state. But her lead receiver was actually Bailey Jones, a fellow freshman, for her 10 receptions, 115 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Her second leading receiver was Delaney Coleman, 8 for 85, and a touchdown for them. And then it was Bryn Hamill, who led with 7 flag pulls. You also had Skylar Harry. I don't know if she's related to Jade Harry. I wouldn't be surprised, though. But she had 4 sacks here. You also had sacks from senior Shane Pirouz, Bryn Hamill, and then the freshman as well, Bailey Jones, all getting up in there. Hamill, Coleman, and Stewart each with interceptions, as Valor dominated in this one amidst the debut of the freshman quarterback Brayson Stewart. Excited to see where her career goes. Then we had Fountain Fort Carson, 5A Fountain Fort Carson playing Elizabeth and losing to Elizabeth 32-6. Kind of big time in this one, which is a tough go for a second-year Fountain Fort Carson program. Moving on here, Doherty would travel up to go ahead and play Chaparral, and Chaparral would win their first one 20-0. As they couldn't really pull away too much, it seemed like here, but still, it was tied actually at halftime, and then they would pull away in that second half 13-7 as Doherty really tried to upset them, and that would have been a big one there. But Zoe Fink, another good game here, 18 of 27, 204 yards, 3 touchdowns. A little bit of a slow start, but that is okay there. Paige Fink's our slow start in that game. The second half definitely picked it up. But Paige Fink, 4 of 79 and a touchdown. Sydney Matthews right behind her, 452 and a touchdown for her. I don't know why it only lists 2 players catching receiving touchdowns, even though it says she threw 3 touchdowns. So that's probably incomplete as of right now. Chloe Patria, though, did lead with 10 flag pulls here. Molly McWilliams continuing her dominance, 3 sacks here to start her senior campaign. Maylee, I think it's Mojica, 2 sacks, and then Patria also had a sack there. Paige Fink with an interception as they go ahead and win their home opener over Doherty 20-0. Rock Canyon looking to bounce back, plays Arvada West here, but Arvada West in their first game goes ahead and dominates 45-6. Emerson Drake with a great game, 15 of 23, 198 yards, 4 touchdowns, also 54 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Emerson Drake, have yourself a day. You are in the Playmaker of the Week conversation here with that type of performance over Rock Canyon. Receiving wise, it was the senior for them, Macy Ferguson, who led with 5 for 55. You also had Grace Shilley here, who was 446 for a touchdown. Alexis Mays 3 or 46 for a touchdown. Kinsley, I think it's Udley here, 2 for 27 and a touchdown. And then the junior for them, Tessa Sullivan, 1 19-yard receiving touchdown. Defensively, they did their thing. Shilley and Alex Antle, co-led with 4 flag pulls. Antle picking up where she left off, 3 sacks there. And then you have 3 interceptions from this secondary, which we knew was good here. You had Hadley Pugliese, Grace Shilley, and then Macy Ferguson. Excuse me if I'm butchering these names, by the way. Oh my God. I really apologize, and please correct me if I'm wrong so I could get it right. But they each got an interception, 3 of those for A West, as they dominate this one, starting the season out strong, 45-6. Speaking of starting the season out strong, you have Grandview, who just absolutely blows out Rangeview, 57-0 here. Brooks Sullivan, 93 yards and 3 touchdowns passing. Also, Cadence Thomas, 60 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Soviude had 73 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Metawa Kalanji also had a rushing touchdown, as well as the sophomore Stella Anderson with a rushing touchdown there. They ran for 177 rushing yards, which is kind of crazy. Kendall Tracy, their lead receiver, 441 and a touchdown. Cadence Thomas, also a receiving touchdown, 2 for 28 right behind her. Defensively, Jaden Traubauer continues to lead here. This defense, 9 flag pulls for them, also 2 sacks. Soviude had a sack, Colette Escobar had a sack, and then the senior for them, Bryn Godwin, had a sack. 7 sacks for this team, but also 5 interceptions here for the squad. As the senior, London McLean, the junior, Maddie Kane, not to rhyme accidentally, Cadence Thomas, as well as Anaya Coleman, each got an interception against Rangeview. For Rangeview, this was a tough go for the sophomore quarterback, Ana Hernandez Rivera, who had a decent game last game, but was held to 7 of 18 for 55 yards, 4 interceptions. They did put in a couple other players, but did not find as much success there. The sophomore, Zanaya Romero King, senior, had 23 rushing yards, and then the junior for them, Mia Stanton, led with 7 receptions for 50 yards. Defensively, it was once again Gabriella Polifort who led with 6 flagpoles, and then you had Ariola and Sabito with a sack each. The senior Ariana Ariola with 2 sacks there. So tough go, but Rangeview falls to Grandview. Now, let's go ahead and move on to Thursday. Not too many games, actually, for this Thursday night. We only have 3. Let's go ahead and start with Arvada West playing Dakota Ridge, and they blow them out 47-0 on a hot streak. 2-0 to start this season. Went on and had a 34-point first half. Woo! To get started here in this one. Emerson Drake dominating to start her junior year, 14 of 18, 197 yards, 6 touchdowns, also 23 rushing yards. Also got a freshman quarterback in there, maybe some visions of the future, in Aria Dawson, 4 of 6 for 56 yards and a touchdown. Receiving wise, Shilly had herself a day, 5 receptions for 71 yards and 3 touchdowns for Grace Shilly. Alexis Mays, 3 for 63 here. And a touchdown. Vivian Brenkert, 2 for 50 and a touchdown. And then Macy Ferguson, 4 for 42 and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, it was the sophomore Mary Hensley who led with 7 flagpoles. And then both Shilly and Pugliese here had 2 interceptions each, as they go ahead and they just dominate Dakota Ridge in this one. Columbine versus Mullen. First off, shout out our intern Roman and check out our Instagram at Playmaker's Corner. He was able to get some great pictures and a highlight reel of this game. Make sure you check that out there. He'll be going to more games around the metro area this season. But Columbine goes ahead and takes down Mullen 18-12 to get their first win of the season here for them. Kennedy Monteith here, 14 of 25, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Also 10 rushing yards, but on the ground, Caitlin Davis, 12 carries for 111 yards, just producing at a crazy rate. Reese McFall here, 5 for 29 and a touchdown for them. And then their lead receiver was Eden Lohman, 3 for 50. And then their lead flag puller was actually Lohman again, 6 flag pulls for them. Lohman with an interception as well, putting in some work. And then Addie Whaley had an interception for Columbine as they go ahead and get by Mullen. And then Mullen does not have any stats. Vista Peak, they go ahead and get their 3rd win of the season, going to 3-1 as they take down Overland 26-0. First game for Overland with a new coaching staff, and it was a tough one there. But Riley Bergquist was very productive, 17 of 27, 157 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, 23 rushing yards for this Vista Peak team. Grace Trammell and Gabrielle Trammell and Joanna Bird would lead this team in receiving. Trammell with 8 receptions for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns. Bird 4 for 53 and a touchdown there. And then defensively, it was Bird who led with 8 flagpoles. And then it would be Olivia Martinez with 3 interceptions as Vista Peak takes care of business against Overland. Looking at Friday, we have a whole bunch of games here on the 5A level. A couple of them in the metro area, and then I think we had 1 or 2, I want to say, in the Springs here, but we're going to go ahead and talk about it right now. Actually, only 1 in the Springs. The rest were in the metro area. As Thunder Ridge, they go ahead and play Fountain Fort Carson, and they win 26-6 over them. No stats from that game. Grandview would also play Rock Canyon, and I believe Grandview beat Rock Canyon, but as of right now, no final score listed. It is Sunday, the 23rd. There should be a final score listed by now. I'm just going to be honest. Fountain Fort Carson, though, would bounce back and get their first win over Manual, 27-6, though, which would be pretty big time there. Doherty would go ahead and play Palmer, and on the boys' side of things, it went very different from the girls' side, but on the girls' side, Doherty continues to dominate this rivalry so far, 47-0 in this game. Looking at the stats, Neela Thompson, 9 of 15, 144 yards and 3 touchdowns. They also had their backup quarterback, Kara Smith, get in there 4-5 for 42 yards. Rushing wise, Bella Marquez had a rushing touchdown, but it was their senior, Julia Thresher, who had 4 carries for 27 yards, which led the team. But Bella Marquez, have yourself a day. 8 receptions, 116 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Definitely the player of this game here. And then you had Madison Romero, who was right behind her, 3 for 45 and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, Marquez led with 4 flag pulls. You had the sophomore for them, McKenna Tran, led with 1 sack. Marquez with 2 interceptions in this game. And then Talia Santos with another interception for them as Doherty takes care of Palmer 47-0. Then we have Thunder Ridge. They went ahead and played Smoky Hill, and they would beat them 18-0. No stats from that game, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and go to our last day here. We got Saturday, August 22nd, and we have a whole bunch of 5A games. So without further ado, and I believe all of these were up in Denver in the metro area as it was popping off. But, let's just go ahead and hop right into these games here. To start off, first off, no score from Heritage Littleton, but I'm pretty sure Heritage won that game. Chatfield would go ahead and play Cherry Creek, and they would beat them 7-0. No stats from this game, but a score in the second quarter would be the difference maker as Chatfield takes down Cherry Creek, and Cherry Creek, for the first time in program history, dropping to 0-2. Denver North would play Lakewood here. I believe Lakewood has moved down to 4A while Denver North moves up. And a tough go there as Lakewood wins big 35-0 over Denver North. Denver East would go ahead and play Pooter, and they would suffer their first loss of the season, 47-7 as Pooter wins big here, starting with their quarterback, the senior Brooke Pavlik, having a nice game, 197 yards on 8 of 16 passing, 4 touchdowns, also 85 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns as she immediately got to work there. Her lead receivers were Pearl Dalton, who had 2 for 116 and 2 touchdowns, as well as Issa Hotman, picking up where she left off, 2 for 53 and 2 touchdowns. Defensively, Hotman led with 10 flag pulls. You also had sacks from Kaufman and Anderson. You had the senior for them, that is Hailey Wolf, who had 2 interceptions, as well as Hotman with an interception. Have yourself a day as Pooter goes ahead and starts their season 1-0, beating Denver East 47-7. Vista Peak Prep would go ahead and begin a win streak here, or continue their win streak as they win 48-0 over Aurora West College Prep Academy. 48-0. I think I said 47-0. But Riley Berquist had herself a day, 16 of 32, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Trammell also 5 of 8 for 70 yards and a touchdown. Berquist also 44 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Their lead receiver was Joanna Bird here, who had 4 receptions for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns. Olivia Martinez, 6 flag pulls. And then you had sacks from Smith, Ansa, and Hall there. And then 6 interceptions from Olivia Martinez, Joanna Bird, and I believe this is the senior Hope Lockhart, each player having 2 as they go ahead and continue as they improve to 3-1. Heritage versus Arapahoe. This would go for the Crystal Cup, and no stats there. We have somebody on staff, but no stats there. I will let Kodey, if he gets to it, break that down. But Arapahoe, for the 3rd straight year, wins 14-7. No score from Gateway versus Kennedy, but I know they played here. Douglas County would go ahead and beat Cherokee Trail 47-0 to move to 2-0, while Cherokee Trail is now 0-2. And then Horizon bounces back with a win they get a win over Eagle Crest 40-6 here. No stats from that game. And I also believe Heritage, they played Littleton and they beat him. I don't know if I said that already, but there you go. Those are your scores from week 1, week 0 on the 5A level.
And now here we go back to the 4A level. I feel like I was a little too close to the mic on the last one. My gain feels super varied. But anyways, we are talking about rankings this time around. And, I think that the rankings came out a little interesting. I'm going to just say in advance that Mountain View is my number 2. And don't come for us too much in the comments here. We see you, and just know we're getting these future journalists some of that good experience here and analysis. So, we'll see what they have to say. And I think that a few more games will also solidify some opinions here, as it is still very early in the season. I don't feel 100% on this. But as far as our top 10 rankings go, just outside of the top 10 was Air Academy, Vista Ridge, Eagle Ridge Academy, Mullen, and Holy Family. Those were all teams that were considered into the mix for here. And like Vista Ridge was my number 8 ranked team because they didn't play anybody yet. You also had some thoughts about them from some of the other voters as well. So those are both things to consider here. Air Academy was somebody who just barely got a vote from Jasmyn at her 9th place spot here. Seeing if they can bounce back against 4A competition as opposed to that 5A competition here. And then Mullen obviously picked up win. Holy Family was somebody who was really in the mix for me as well. And Eagle Ridge Academy, who was voted on by Angie here following their win over Conifer. But moving on to our tie for 8th, which takes the place of 9 and 8, obviously, are 2 teams who got 8 points worth of votes here. George Washington, who is ranked 8th by Jasmyn here, and were ranked 6th by me. They actually slid down my rankings, but they did not play, so that's part of the reason why they're going to be a little different. We just still have to see what they're made of here. Meanwhile, Pomona is in 8th place here. Jasmyn put them at her number 7 spot, and you also had Angie who had them at number 8, and I kept them at number 10, and I said that the early defeat will not define this team, and a dominant win over Thornton still shows that they got something in the tank. But for me, that kept them behind another team that we will talk about here in a little bit. Now, moving on to 7th place is Wheat Ridge in sole possession of this, with votes at 6th place for both Angie and Jasmyn. Obviously, they had the biggest win in 4A this week. They also had the loss to Aurora Central, and I think that the 65-0 definitely caught the eyes of Jasmyn and Angie. And while I do respect that as a big win, I'm not necessarily sold on Aurora Central and on Kennedy in that way to put Wheat Ridge in my personal top 10. But, I can't deny that 60 points is a lot of gosh darn points. I have not coached a team to score 60 points yet. So to be fair, they did hold up their end of the bargain here and slid into the 7th spot here with 10 total points of votes. Here at number 6 is Lutheran. Now they were tied for 10th last week. So this is big news for them as they head in here. And, I think that between their ranking at 7th for Angie and really their ranking at 4th for me was a huge part of their fuel here. I did notate that they were up 76-0 in point differential, but they have a really tough week up ahead, so we will see how they rise to that occasion. But they do jump up plenty of spots here and do turn the head of Angie on our voting committee. Now, in 5th place here is a team that did get vote from every single member of our poll here. Berthoud here at number 5 with 13 points. Jasmyn had them at number 4, saying lost to Mountain View, but 2-1 is not bad. You also had them at 9th place for Angie, and for myself, I put them at 7th. And I said, while they did get stonewalled against Mountain View, they showed the ability to win battles of attrition against Eagle Ridge Academy and Holy Family. But the interesting test will be, by the time you're listening to this, tonight against Monarch, which is not a school that we've heard from until right now. Just ahead of Berthoud at 4th place is Monarch from our polls. They got the 5th spot from Jasmyn, the 4th spot from Angie, and they got my number 9 spot. Now, I did note that they sit at 2-0 after wins over Northridge and Pomona, but they will have to fare with some fire teams in the north to show their worth, those teams being Berthoud as well as Mountain View. Now, notice that in my rankings, I had Pomona at 10 and now Monarch at 9. So that win put them just ahead for me. But really, this game between Bertha and Monarch is going to determine a lot of our views here of them in our rankings. And Jasmyn notated that they did score nearly 20 points in both of their wins and picked up both wins. So far, Lakewood 10 after being not ranked, George Washington at 8th in a tie, dropping 4 spots, Pomona dropping 2 spots, Wheat Ridge at 7 after having not been ranked, Lutheran up 4 spots at number 6, Berthoud at 5, Monarch at 4, both of those teams formerly not ranked, and now our top 3 where it's the same 3 teams, but maybe a little controversial here, as Mountain View is sitting at the 3rd spot all by themselves. No notes, as Jasmyn and Angie both had them at their number 3. Now, I have them exclusively at number 2. I said they took care of the new kids on the block and remain here at 2 for me. But, they will have plenty more chances to further solidify their spot here as the second best team in 4A, or maybe even the first best team, depending on what all happens. But tied for first is Green Mountain and TCA, both with 28 total points. You had Green Mountain being voted first by both Angie and Jasmyn. Jasmyn saying, although they lost, it was only by 2 points, and they scored 20 points in 1 quarter, which is insane. And then she said about TCA, allowed Green Mountain to score 20 points in 1 quarter. Yes, they are 2-0 right now, but that game was close, and they maybe got lucky, end quote. Meanwhile, I just kept TCA at my number 1 because they remain unbeaten, and I kept Green Mountain at number 3. I wasn't going to overpunish them because I think they lost to 2 of potentially the top 5 teams in the state between Legend as well as TCA. But I did mention in the season preview that a complete game and sticking the landing is the hurdle facing this squad. They were not able to do that in both of these games, and especially the TCA game is concerning. Having a lead going into the 4th quarter and losing it, not only having a lead, having a 2-score lead heading into the 4th quarter and losing it just kind of shows me, or at least my opinion right now, it's the same old Green Mountain who can't finish those games. So those are my concerns for Green Mountain, but alas, they still remain here, tied for the first spot here, and did enough in their other games as well as that contest to earn Angie and Jasmyn's votes. So tied for first place is still TCA and Green Mountain. Sitting in 3rd place is Mountain View, Monarch at 4, Berth at 5, Lutheran 6, Wheat Ridge 7. Tied for 8th is Pomona and George Washington, and 10th is Lakewood with Air Academy, Vista Ridge, ERA, Mullen, and Holy Family sitting just outside. There are some massive, massive games coming up here this next week to absolutely keep an eye on here, and we will definitely be doing that in order to try and best update these rankings the next week. But that is all I have for rankings for the time being. Until then, I'm going to pass it off to Coach V, aka Simon Villanos, for the 5A rankings.
All right, Coach V here, and I got your 5A power rankings here. Myself, Gino, and Hailey all did a preseason ranking where, and I'm just going to list it right now. We had Doherty at 10, Horizon at 9, Douglas County at 8, Valor at 7, 6, Ralston Valley, 5, Arvada West, 4, Mountain Vista, 3, Grandview, 2, Chaparral, number 1 was Legend here. That was our preseason rankings, and basically how we do this is that myself and the others, we individually rank teams 1 through 10. If any of us rank a team at 1, they get 10 points, 2, 9 points, 3, 8 points, and so on and so on. And then basically we go ahead and add up all those points, and that kind of averages it out. So if I'm explaining or talking about one of the reasons why a team is ranked where they are, and they refer to their team at a certain rank, they're referring to their personal rankings. Our PMC rankings is the average, and it is also what we post on our graphics, so make sure you check us out at Playmaker's Corner. But Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into it. We had a very busy week 0 and week 1, a little bit of a shakeup here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the team that is just out, which is at 10, and it's Thunder Ridge. Hailey had them ranked here in her preseason top 10. And so Thunder Ridge for her is basically just sitting outside of her top 10. I know they went ahead and played, and they're currently 2-1. They took down Smoky Hill. They took down Fountain Fort Carson. They did lose to a good Lutheran team, which is tough, and it's also why they are hanging on to that 10 spot and not in our actual, not 10 spot, but hanging on to our just out spot, her 10 spot, and just outside of our top 10. So there you go, though. But at 10, we actually have a 3-way tie for 10th place between Chatfield, Doherty, and Liberty. I believe Liberty is also a 5A team. When we were looking on Max Preps and classifying them, they kept coming up as a 5A team. So we're assuming that they are also one of those 5A teams in this classification, and we'll make that for the playoffs. And so let's talk about it, actually. So the interesting thing is that myself and Gino, we actually coach at Vanguard, so we got to see Liberty up front here, and unfortunately that was a pretty close loss that we had against them, which I feel like maybe is contributing just a little bit to why they are ranked here, or at least getting votes and being ranked right here. They're a good squad. Currently, they are 3-0. They beat Sierra. They beat us. They also beat Air Academy 37-7, which was a playoff team right there. They play Fountain Fort Carson next, so that'll be an interesting one for sure. We'll see how good this Liberty team truly is. But currently, they are 3-0. One of the few undefeated 5A teams out here, as well as, I want to say, Arapahoe is also 3-0, so there you go. Or excuse me, they're 2-0, but still, regardless, though, undefeated. So there is that. Now, the other teams tied here is Chatfield and Doherty. Now, those are both teams who have lost a game this season and are holding on to a top 10 spot and have gotten top 10 votes here. Let's start with Chatfield. First off, they're 2-1. Their first game was a close loss to North Glen in overtime, 13-7, but then since has bounced back with wins against Regis Jesuit 26-13 and Cherry Creek 7-0. They get a tough one against Valor, so playing all the tough, powerhouse private school, well, not private school, but like usually boy powerhouse football teams here, and doing their thing as they continue to win. So that's good for Chatfield. They got Valor next. We'll see if they're going to be able to stay in this top 10. And then we got Doherty, currently 1-1. Played Chaparral and actually played them pretty close. It was 0-0 at halftime, and then they ended up losing 20-0 to Chap here. They would bounce back and beat the rivals Palmer 47-0 for a program, but just being honest, to stay in this top 10, they're probably going to have to win a couple more games. They got Thunder Ridge and Rock Canyon, as well as Denver South here next, who are all pretty decent teams and will get them ranked, or at least staying power in our top 10. Moving on, though, so there you go. Tied at 10 were 3 teams there. But moving on, we have another tie at 8, and it is North Glen and Ralston Valley. 2 teams kind of in very different spots here. North Glen has only played 1 game, and it was against Chatfield, who they beat in OT 13-7. They get Lakewood next, who is a 4A team now, but a decent 4A team, as well as Thunder Ridge, Mountain Range. I believe that Chatfield game was probably their toughest game until they got to play Horizon here soon. Pooter is probably up there as well, who's also undefeated at 1-0, but realistically, I mean, we were talking about this. These teams from 7 to really 13 or 14 all feel very much the same. There's not a big difference here yet. So there you go. But we got to rank teams anyways, and this is what we're going with. So there you go. But North Glen one win, a good win over Chatfield, though. They go ahead and enter our top 10. And then we have Ralston Valley. Right now they're 1-2, but it is definitely a tough 1-2 here, playing some good teams. Lost to Mountain Vista by a lot, who some of us do have ranked number 1, so there's that. Then they did beat Cherry Creek, which is something, get their first win. But then they got blown out by Green Mountain. Now, Green Mountain is a very good program in the 4A classification. I think they're a very good program, period. I think they're probably the second best program in 4A. At least they're up there for sure. And they got a lot of great talent, too. So there's that, but losing 39-0 is definitely a tough go, and it doesn't get easier. They play Legend, Columbine, and Valor after that, plus Arvada Western, Chatfield, and Chap. So this next stretch is really tough, and if they can't get a couple wins here, it's going to be hard to justify keeping Ralston Valley up here is all I am saying. So there you go there. But now let's go ahead and move to 7. And we have Douglas County, who does actually move up exactly one spot in our rankings here. And Douglas County currently 2-0, and it's a very strong 2-0 so far, at least, beating Eagle Crest 36-0 and Cherokee Trail 47-0 here, not losing too much of step despite losing some great players. We don't have stats from those games, unfortunately, but Douglas County doing their thing, and so we go ahead and reward them as they move up to number 7. Now at number 6 is currently Valor Christian. That is a team I have ranked at 6, and then I believe Gino and Hailey have them up or just below at 7. But only played one game so far, and they beat Denver South 21-0, and look pretty decent doing so. Up next, they got Chatfield, Ralston Valley, Poudre, and Arvada West, which is kind of a tough go right there. You're playing some very good teams, but I think that it's going to be really telling of what kind of squad they are if they can go ahead and rattle off some wins. Ralston Valley kind of seems like a winnable one since they've slid a little bit. Same with Poudre, but Arvada West will definitely be tough. And actually, Poudre might also be tough too. We will see. But for now, Valor moves up to our 6th spot. At 5, to start our top 5, is Chaparral. This is what Hailey had to say about them winning their first game 20-0, no points allowed against a team who turned around and put up almost 50. Definitely says something. I would like to see more points in the first half, though. And I agree, Chaparral did only put up 20 in their home opener. And so I'm really interested in seeing how the rest of this week goes pretty much here, or the rest of their season. They play Poudre on the 26th. That'll be an interesting squad right there, a team that has some firepower, and then Arapahoe, Ralston Valley after that. And so for Chap, we'll see what they are made of going into that Poudre game. But for now, they stay right here at top 5. Now, at 4, though, is Grandview. This is what Hailey said about them starting 2-0 and putting up 90 while allowing 0. Looks like a good start, and I think that streak will continue and will be running well by the time they play higher ranked teams. And I kind of agree here. It's not that they played the toughest teams in the state, and it's fine that they haven't, but they did get to dominate them. I think that is definitely something that I look at, and I'm like, yeah, this point differential is significant. Legacy 33-0, Rangeview 57-0. Their next toughest game is probably Rock Canyon. Then you got Regis, Vista Peak, Columbine, Legend, and Mountain Vista there. So you got quite the run to go on, but to start against opponents that aren't as good right now is obviously never the worst thing. Go ahead and gain some confidence as they build up to it. So there you go. But Grandview right now sits at 4. At 3 is Arvada West, who does move up 2 spots compared to our preseason rankings for us. And I think it's very well-deserved here. Emerson, Drake, and company has been having a very strong start to the season. Starting 2-0 right now, they've blown out Rock Canyon 45-0 and Dakota Ridge 47-0. Those are decent programs. I got to respect that. Now, they do get Mountain Vista on the 25th, as well as Chatfield on the 28th. So they're going to get pushed, and then this next week is going to be really telling to see where they are actually at as a program. So there you go. Now, at number one, actually, we have a tie between Mountain Vista and Legend. And actually, my bad. Before we do that, Hailey had something to say about Arvada West. She said they had 2 wins running up the score in the early quarters. Defense has been holding their own as well as getting multiple picks in both games and giving their offense more opportunities. I'm excited to see what their next couple games look like, and I am as well. So there you go. Wanted to make sure I read off her note. But tied at 1, we actually have 2, and it's Mountain Vista and Legend here. Gino and Hailey actually had Mountain Vista ranked at 1, and then I had them at 3 because I do like Grandview still, but I also have Legend at 1 while they have Legend at 2 and 2 respectively. And you know what? I think it's fair. Both teams currently are undefeated. Both teams with young junior quarterbacks. Addison the Judge Law for Legend, and then you got Peyton Marr for Mountain Vista. You know, they've been putting up points. Putting up a lot of points here. And as well as defensively, I mean, looking at Mountain Vista with Kaylee Besh, Culebro, and McMeekin, you know, they got a great secondary, while Legend with their rushing group up front of Jenna Brown, Tori Curdy, throw in Ryan Matouche as well. You know, that's a very difficult squad too. So it looks like they could be bound for yet another state championship. We'll see. Both teams have lost quarterbacks and some key players, but I've looked good. They haven't really missed a step here, and have been playing at a very high level. Now, this is what Gino had to say about Legend. He said offense is looking unstoppable. Going to be fun to see if they can claim the number 1 spot soon here, as he has about 1. Hailey says starting strong and scoring early in games, they're very likely to be a top 3 program, which I agree. And then this is what Hailey had to say about Mountain Vista. After their big win against RV, they're making it clear that they're still one of the heaviest hitters in 5A, which I agree. And then Gino had this to say about Mountain Vista, and it's just they have never lost, which does mean something for sure. And so Mountain Vista and Legend, I think, truthfully, should both deserve to be number 1. Now, one is eventually going to have to surpass the other. I believe they both play this year, so that'll definitely be interesting here. But, you know, those are 2 teams that are looking to be some of the most fun programs to follow this season, both on the offensive side and defensive side of the ball. So there you go. They're tied at 1. So there you go. That is your 2026 5A Week 1, Week 0 rankings there. Once again, Thunder Ridge is just out. Tied at 10 is Chatfield Liberty Doherty. Tied at 8 is North Glen and Ralston Valley. 7 Douglas County, 6 Valor Christian, 5 Chaparral, 4 Grandview, 3 Arvada West, and tied at 1 is Mountain Vista and Legend.
And thank you to Hailey, Gino, and Coach V on those 5A rankings. And now we're getting back to the good stuff here. Playmaker of the Week. And, you know, I do want to say that I wanted to consider a TCA player or a Monarch player, but there were no stats. I'd love to throw more shade if I didn't have my own shade my way for me not having any stats in for Arapahoe. Otherwise, I'd throw a little bit more. But for now, you know, Ava Webb here was definitely in the mix amongst the TCA and Monarch players here. 8 receptions, nearly 200 yards, 2 scores in Lakewood's absolutely big time debut over Denver North. But I'm going to go with a player from a brand new program. I'm going to go with Eleanor Carlson, the quarterback out of Lutheran High School, leading them to their first 2 wins, being a major part of the absolute beatdowns that they've been given out as they beat 5A Thunder Ridge and 50-piece Highlands Ranch. Eleanor being really close to perfect here. 9 touchdowns, no listed interceptions. That's not to say that none happened, but at least none on the stat sheet. 9 touchdowns, almost double digit across 2 games. 489 yards on 57% completion percentage. I wish that there was a bit more drama that I could stir up here, but you know, everyone's kind of getting settled into the season super duper early here. And if you want to be the proud sponsor of our Playmakers of the Week and help build up a drum roll, getting your information out here, be sure to reach out to us at playmakers.corner@gmail.com. That's playmakers.corner@gmail.com. So that way you can be the source for Playmaker of the Week, including the 4A Playmaker of the Week, Eleanor Carlson. Once again, 9 touchdowns, 489 yards out of Parker, Colorado, which might be a familiar location for Coach V's segment coming right up.
Okay, real quick, let's talk Playmaker of the Week. This goes to the best performance from a playmaker on the 5A level here. And, we got 3 quarterbacks here, actually 3 junior quarterbacks who will be competing for a lot moving forward. And that is Mountain Vista's very own Peyton Marr against Ralston Valley in their opener here, 27-45, 280 yards, 24 rushing yards, and 5 passing touchdowns in that 49-6 blowout to get their season started. We also have Addison Law, the judge from Legend here, 26 of 28 for 275 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and a 49-22 win over Green Mountain. And then also went 17 of 23 for 237 yards and 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, 5 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in a 46-0 win over Horizon. And then last but not least, we have Arvada West's Emerson Drake here, 14 of 18, 197 yards, 6 touchdowns, 23 rushing yards, and a blowout of Dakota Ridge. And then also had 15 of 23 for 198 yards, 4 touchdowns, 54 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns in a 45-6 blowout of Rock Canyon. But there can only be one Playmaker of the Week here, and that will be Addison Law, a.k.a. the judge, a.k.a. the junior quarterback from Legend, who just had herself a day, as the Legend is looking like one of the stronger teams in the state with those 2 wins over Green Mountain and Horizon.
And just like that, we find ourselves at the end of this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast with the Week 1 recap and a little bit of Week 0 of 4A and 5A flag football here in the state of Colorado. Be tuned, as I plan on adding a segment next week here, so be excited for that, as I think that there is a lot to kind of look at and cover for the state. We're so glad to be back, especially with the help. Huge shout out to the team we have here at Playmakers Corner. Jasmyn Greenwood, Angie Lor, both helping me with the 4A stuff. And then obviously Gino and Coach V holding it down on 5A, along with Hailey, who, we love to say that we have all college flag football players on our staff in that part. I also got to give a shout out to my guy Shots by Roman, who is helping provide with coverage as far as interviews, as far as pictures, as far as videos and highlights. He has been absolutely awesome. So make sure to go give him a follow. Once again, that is at Shots by Roman on Instagram. And, he's doing really, really great work. And my apologies, it's Shot by Roman is what I should say. And also his main account is at Roman Blomeyer here. So huge shout out to him, as well as the rest of our interns who are doing such a great job. Be sure to stay tuned for their seasons in the spring, as well as a bunch of other Colorado talent and the Colorado talent that we're going to continue to cover no matter where you are, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube. We also promote on our TikTok, as well as Instagram, Twitter/X, and Facebook for all of our socials and covers and more content to come. Stay tuned for all of those. Follow us on all of them. And until next time, I have been your host, Kodey Stauffer, peacing out.